The afternoon sun was high above the mountains, beating down on the white stone walls of the grand resort. It was the kind of place where people went to forget about the rest of the world. The air inside the main lobby always smelled cool and expensive, like lemons and fresh flowers. It was quiet, too. The only sounds came from the soft slaps of expensive shoes on the marble floor or the quiet clinking of glasses at the far end. Out of the hall, in the very center of this huge room, stood the piano. It was a beautiful, shiny black instrument. It looked like a piece of art more than something to make music with. Most of the time, it just sat there. It was a prop for the wealthy guests to look at while they checked in or waited for their cars. Leela was not a guest. She lived in a small room downstairs where the staff stayed. She worked long hours cleaning the luxury suites and making sure everything looked perfect for the people, paid thousands of dollars a night to stay there. She was 24 years old, with dark hair tied back in a tight bun and hands that were often rough from the cleaning supplies. She used every day. It was Leela's break time. It was only 20 minutes long, but it was the best part of her day. She usually didn't go to the cafeteria. Instead, she walked to the corner of the lobby where the piano sat. She liked the way the light hit the shiny black surface. She would sit on the velvet bench, wipe her hands on her apron, and just rest. Sometimes, if no one was looking, she would rest her fingers on the cold white keys. She didn't press them down to make a sound. She just imagined the music in her head she used to play when she was a little girl. Her family didn't have much money, but they had an old beaten-up piano. Her mother had taught her to play. But those days were gone now. Her mother was sick, and the money Leela earned here was sent back home to pay for doctors. She hadn't played a real song in years. On this particular afternoon, the lobby was emptier than usual. The big glass doors were open, letting in a warm breeze. Lila sat on the bench. She let out a long, tired sigh. Her feet hurt from standing up all morning. She closed her eyes for a moment, enjoying the peace. She placed her hands lightly on the keys, careful not to make a noise. She just wanted to feel the ivory under her fingertips. She didn't hear him walk up. She was too lost in her thoughts. "Excuse me," a deep voice said. Layla jumped. Her eyes flew open, and she quickly pulled her hands back into her lap, as if she had been caught doing something terrible. She stood up immediately, smoothing the front of her uniform. Standing in front of her was a man who looked like he owned the building. He was wearing a crisp white shirt that was open at the collar. No tie, but you could tell it cost more than Leela's monthly salary. He had a watch on his wrist that glinted in the sunlight. His name was Amir, though Leila didn't know that. To her, he was just another wealthy guest who probably wanted something. "I am sorry, sir," Leila said quickly, looking down at the floor. "I was just resting. I will go." The man didn't step aside to let her pass. He looked at her, then at the piano, and then back at her. He had a look on his face that wasn't exactly angry, but it wasn't kind either. It was the look people give when they see something that doesn't belong in its place. He was used to giving orders and having people obey him instantly. "Resting?" Amir asked. He raised an eyebrow. "On the instrument?" "It was the only empty seat," Lila said softly. She tried to step around him, but he shifted his weight, blocking her path. "You know," Amir said, crossing his arms over his chest, "this is a Steinway. It is a very expensive piano. It is for guests who actually know how to play music. It is not a chair for the cleaning staff." Leela felt her face get hot. She was used to being ignored, or sometimes treated like she was invisible. But it was different to be spoken to like this. She kept her head down. "I understand, sir. I didn't mean any harm." Amir looked at her hands. They were red and rough. "Your hands," he said, shaking his head slightly. "They look like they have been scrubbing tiles all day. Pianos require soft hands. Delicate hands." He laughed a little, a short, dry sound. "Don't tell me you think you can play this thing." Lela looked up at him then. Her eyes met his. She felt a sudden spark of annoyance in her chest. She was used to working hard. She was used to people assuming things about her because of her uniform. But she didn't like him laughing at her. "I used to play," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it was steady. Amir let out a loud, sarcastic laugh. A few people at the front desk turned to look, but he didn't care. You used to play?" He looked her up and down, taking in her simple black shoes and her uniform apron. "Please, people like you don't play music like this. People like you clean the rooms so people like me can enjoy the music." The words hung in the air between them. They were harsh and cruel. Lila felt a sting behind her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of him. She clenched her fists at her sides. She remembered the hours she spent practicing as a child. She remembered the feeling of her mother smiling as she played a complicated piece. She knew she had talent, even if she didn't have a piano anymore. "I think anyone can play if they have the heart for it," Layla said. She was surprised at her own bravery. Amir smirked. He found this amusing now. "The heart," he repeated, mocking her tone. "Look, this is a serious place. We don't need fairy tales about heart. Either you have the skill, or you don't." He gestured to the piano dismissively. "And looking at you, I can tell you don't. Probably just bang on the keys like a child." He took a step closer, trying to intimidate her. "Why don't you go back to the kitchens? That is where you belong. Leave the art to the professionals." Leela stood her ground. She looked at the beautiful black piano. She looked at the arrogant man in front of her. She knew she should just walk away. She knew that getting into an argument with a guest could get her fired. She needed this job. Her mother needed the money. But there was something in his voice, that absolute certainty that she was nothing, that made her angry. It wasn't just about the piano. It was about the way he looked at her, like she was dirt on his shoe. She felt a sudden desire to prove him wrong, to show him that there was more to her than a uniform and rough hands.
"I am not going to the kitchens yet,"
Leela said. Amir raised an eyebrow again. He was intrigued now. "And what do you plan to do?" Lila took a deep breath. She looked him straight in the eye. "You said I can't play. You said I just bang on the keys. You challenged me, so I did," Amir said, leaning back against a marble pillar. "And let me play," Layla said. "If I play badly, if I just bang on the keys, I will never touch this piano again. I will admit you are right." She paused for a second. "But if I play well, you have to stay here and listen to the whole song. And you have to apologize." The lobby seemed to go even quieter. The guests nearby were trying not to stare, but everyone was listening. Amir looked at the young woman standing in front of him. He saw the determination in her eyes. He didn't think for a second that she could actually play. He thought this would be a quick, easy victory to amuse himself. He loved a sure bet. "Fine," Amir said, a confident smile spreading across his face. "I have time before my meeting." "Go ahead." He waved his hand at the piano like a king granting a favor to a peasant. "Show me this heart you keep talking about. Entertain me." Layla turned away from him. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. She sat down on the velvet bench. It felt harder than usual. She looked at the black and white keys. They had always been her friends. They had always been there for her when she was sad or scared. She flexed her fingers. They were stiff and tired. She rubbed them together quickly, trying to warm them up. Behind her, she could hear Amir shifting his weight, probably checking his watch already, waiting for her to fail. She could feel his smug smile boring into her back. Lila closed her eyes for a second. She blocked out the luxury lobby. She blocked out the marble floors and the chandeliers. She forgot about the scrubbing and the cleaning. She thought of her mother. She thought of the old piano back home. She imagined the notes floating in the air. She placed her hands on the keys. This time, she didn't rest them gently. She pressed down. She wasn't going to play a simple song. She wasn't going to play a safe song. She was going to play something difficult. She was going to play something that required every bit of focus she had. She took one last deep breath. The air in the room felt heavy. She lifted her hand slightly, ready to strike the first chord. She wasn't doing this to impress a billionaire. She was doing this to prove something to herself. "Okay," she whispered to herself. She didn't wait for Amir to say start. She just played. The sound that came out was loud and clear, crashing through the silence of the lobby like a wave. It wasn't a bang. It was a perfect, resonant chord that seemed to shake the dust off the rafters. And before the sound even faded, her fingers were moving, flying across the keys faster than she had moved in years. The sound that came out of the piano was not a bang. It was a shockwave. It was a deep, rolling chord that seemed to vibrate right through the floorboards and up the legs of the furniture. It was the kind of sound that demanded attention. It's the kind of sound that stopped conversations in an instant. Layla did not stop. She didn't wait to see if the man behind her was surprised. She didn't look around to see the guests dropping their jaws. She kept her eyes locked on the keys. Her hands, usually so slow and tired from scrubbing, suddenly came alive. They moved with a speed and grace that didn't seem possible for someone who spent her days cleaning toilets. She started with a fast, angry rhythm. Her left hand jumped down the low keys, pounding out a beat like a heartbeat, while her right hand danced up the high keys, playing a melody that was sharp and cutting. It was not a gentle song. It was a fight. It felt like she was arguing with the piano, pushing every emotion she had ever felt into the music. Behind her, Amir stood frozen. He had been checking his watch, ready to yawn, ready to laugh. But when that first chord hit him, he physically flinched. His arm dropped to his side. He looked at the back of the young woman's head. He saw the tight bun of dark hair, the straight posture of her back. He couldn't believe it. He had expected random noise. He had expected her to fumble and look confused. But this was different. This was controlled. This was powerful. The lobby, which had been filled with the quiet hum of expensive whispers, went completely silent. A waiter holding a silver tray stopped mid-step. A couple checking in at the front desk turned away from the receptionist to look at the piano. Everyone was drawn to the sound. It wasn't just loud. It was beautiful. It was raw. Leela's fingers were a blur. She played a complicated section of the song where her hands had to cross over each other, moving in opposite directions. Her knuckles were white with the effort, but her touch was precise. She wasn't just hitting the notes. She was shaping them. She made the soft notes whisper and the loud notes roar. It was like she was telling a story without using a single word. Amir took a step closer. He narrowed his eyes. He was looking for a mistake. He was desperate to find something wrong, something that would prove his point. He looked at her hands again. They were still rough, the skin red, but they moved with the memory of a master. He realized then that her hands were not ruined by work. They were tempered by it. They were strong. He thought about the expensive pianists he hired for his parties back home. They wore tuxedos and played perfectly, but often their music felt cold. It was technical, like a math problem. But this music was hot. It was messy and full of fire. He could actually feel the anger in the way she struck the keys. She was playing for everyone who had ever been told no. She was playing for everyone who had ever been looked down upon. The song shifted. The fast, angry rhythm slowed down. The loud, crashing chords turned into soft, trickling notes that sounded like water falling over stones. The mood in the room changed instantly. The tension in the air broke, replaced by a feeling of sadness. It was a beautiful, deep sadness that made people want to hold their breath. Leela's head dipped slightly. Her shoulders relaxed. For a moment, she wasn't in the luxury hotel. She wasn't scrubbing floors. She was back in her small house, sitting next to her mother. She remembered the smell of the old wood of their piano, the way the sunlight used to hit the dust motes in the air. She missed those days. She missed the freedom she felt before the bills and the sickness took over. She poured that longing into the music. It was so heavy that some of the guests felt a lump in their throats. A woman in a silk dress put a hand over her chest, visibly moved. The piano sang, crying out a melody of lost dreams and hidden hopes. Amir stood near a marble pillar, his arms uncrossed now. He had completely forgotten his arrogance. He was listening. Really listening? He heard the skill, yes, but he also heard the pain. He realized that this girl, this maid who he thought was invisible, had a world inside her that was bigger and deeper than anything he had encountered in a long time. He felt a strange sensation in his chest, the pang of guilt. He remembered the cruel things he had said about her hands. He felt small. The song continued to build, rising and falling like the tide. Leela's fingers were starting to hurt. She hadn't played like this in years. Her muscles were protesting, screaming at her to stop. But she didn't dare stop. She knew that if she stopped now, the spell would break, and she would just be a maid in a uniform again. She kept going. Pushing through the pain in her wrist and the stiffness in her fingers, she started to play the climax of the piece. It was a storm of notes, fast and difficult. Her right hand flew up the keyboard, playing a run of notes that were so fast they sounded like a swarm of bees. Then came the big chords, crashing down again and again, getting louder and louder. She put her whole body into it, swaying slightly with the rhythm. The sound filled the huge lobby. It bounced off the high ceilings and the glass walls. It was overwhelming. It commanded respect. Amir watched her hands. He saw the effort on her face. He saw the sweat forming on her forehead. He realized she was giving this performance everything she had. She wasn't holding back. She wasn't saving her energy for work. She was emptying herself out into the music. He had never seen that kind of passion before. He was used to people doing things for money, for status, for approval. This girl was doing it because she had to. The music was trapped inside her, and it had to come out. The final passage approached. The music slowed down again, returning to the soft, simple melody from the beginning. But now it sounded different. It sounded wiser. It sounded like someone who had been through a battle and survived. Leela's fingers caressed the keys one last time. She played a final, delicate chord that rang out into the silence. She held her hands over the keys, letting the sound fade away until there was nothing left but the hum of the air conditioning. She didn't move. She sat there, staring at the black and white keys, her chest rising and falling fast. She was exhausted. Her fingers tingled. For a second, she was afraid to turn around. She was afraid that everyone would be gone, or worse, they would be laughing, but no one laughed. The lobby was dead silent. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air is full of electricity. No one spoke. No one moved. It was as if the entire room was holding its breath, afraid that making a sound would break the magic. Layla took a shaky breath and pulled her hands back into her lap. She slowly turned around on the bench to face the room. She saw the guests first. The woman in the silk dress was wiping a tear from her eye. The waiter had completely forgotten about his tray. The front desk staff were just standing there, staring at her with their mouths open. They looked at her differently now. They didn't see a cleaner. They saw a musician. Then her eyes found Amir. He was standing alone near the pillar. His face had changed completely. The smirk was gone. The bored look was gone. He looked pale. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost, or maybe a man who had just been punched in the stomach by reality. He was staring right at her, but he wasn't looking at her uniform. He was looking into her eyes. For a long moment, nobody said anything. The silence stretched on, becoming uncomfortable. But in a strange way, it was also a compliment. The music had been so good that words felt useless. Leela felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. The adrenaline was wearing off, and she suddenly remembered where she was. She stood up quickly, smoothing her apron instinctively. She felt exposed. She had poured her heart out, and now she felt naked in front of all these rich people. I have to go, she whispered. She didn't wait for a response. She couldn't face the billionaire. She couldn't face his judgment, whatever it was going to be. She was scared he would just laugh and say she got lucky. She couldn't take that. She turned and began to walk quickly toward the staff corridor, her head down, trying to be invisible again. The single word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. It wasn't a shout, but it cut through the silence deeper than any yell could have. Leela froze with her hand halfway to the staff door. Her back was to the lobby, but she could feel the weight of the eyes upon her. The spell of the music was broken, replaced instantly by the cold reality of her position. She was a staff member running away from a guest. Her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard it hurt. She wanted to keep walking. She wanted to disappear into the safety of the basement corridors, put on her headphones, and forget this ever happened. But her feet wouldn't move. Years of training to obey guests, to stop when called, to be invisible but available, kicked in. She slowly turned around. The lobby didn't look the same as it had 5 minutes ago. The invisible wall between the guests and the staff seemed to have dissolved. The man at the front desk wasn't pretending to work anymore. The woman in the silk dress had lowered her handkerchief. Everyone was looking at her, really looking at her. Perhaps for the first time since she started working there, Amir took a step forward. He didn't look like a man who was ready to admit defeat easily. His face was a mask of conflicting emotions, confusion, frustration, a grudging respect that he clearly wasn't used to feeling. He walked away from the pillar, his expensive shoes clicking on the marble. He stopped a few feet away from her, close enough that she could see the tiny lines of stress around his eyes. "You are not going anywhere," Amir said. His voice was lower now, lacking the arrogant sneer from before. "We had a deal." Leela looked at the floor. She felt small again, the music fading from her fingers, leaving them cold and tingling. "I played, sir," she said softly. "I have to get back to work. My break is over." "You played," Amir agreed. He crossed his arms, but it wasn't a defensive gesture anymore. It looked like he was trying to hold himself together. "You played like you have a demon inside you. You played like—" He struggled to find the words. He waved a hand vaguely in the air, frustrated by his own vocabulary. "You played like a professional. A master." Layla risked a glance up at him. "You said I didn't have it in me." "I was wrong," Amir said. The words came out stiffly, as if they tasted bitter in his mouth. He wasn't good at apologizing. He wasn't used to being wrong. But looking at her, seeing the exhaustion on her face, and the fire still lingering in her eyes, he couldn't deny the truth. "I looked at your uniform and I made a judgment. I thought this piano was just a decoration for people like me, and that people like you, people who work, could only ruin it." He looked at the shiny black instrument, then back at her. "I was foolish. That music, it wasn't just skill. It was feeling. It was real." The lobby was quiet, but it wasn't the uncomfortable silence of before. It was a respectful hush. People were witnessing something rare. A powerful man humbling himself before a cleaning lady. "You accept your apology, sir," Layla said. She meant it, but she still felt the urge to flee. She didn't want his praise. She just wanted to go back to her routine where life was simple and expectations were low. "No," Amir said, shaking his head. "That is not enough. You proved me wrong, but now you are running away." "Why?" Lila sighed. She looked at her rough hands. "Because this is a dream, sir, and I have to wake up. My mother is waiting for my support. My boss is waiting for me to finish the suites in the West Wing. I can't stand here and be a musician. I have to be a worker." Amir stared at her. He was a man who solved problems with money. If he wanted something, he bought it. If he had a bad day, he bought a faster car or a rarer watch. He looked at Leela and saw a problem, a talent that was being wasted, a light that was being covered by a bushel. "How much?" he asked abruptly. Layla frowned. "Excuse me?" "Money," Amir said, pulling a thick leather wallet from his pocket. "How much do you make here?" "I will pay it. I will pay double. I will pay whatever it takes. You will sit back down, and you will play for me. I have a business meeting later, but I don't care. I want to hear you play again." He opened the wallet, revealing a stack of colorful, high-value bills. It was more cash than Leela had seen in her entire life. He pulled a bundle out and held it out to her. Leela looked at the money. She felt a physical pull toward it. She thought about her mother's medicine. She thought about the rent she was struggling to pay. She thought about how easy her life would be if she just took the money. It would solve everything. All she had to do was sit down and play. She looked up at Amir. His eyes were eager. He wanted to own the experience. He wanted to buy the magic he had just heard. Just like he bought everything else. A strange feeling came over Layla. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. She realized that if she took the money, the music would change. If she played for cash, she would become a jukebox. She would be performing for him, trying to please him rather than playing for herself. And that wasn't why she had played. She had played to prove a point. Yes, but mostly she had played because the music needed to come out. She reached out and gently pushed his hand away. She didn't take the money. "I can't take it, sir," she said. Amir looked stunned. He pulled his hand back as if she had bitten him.
What? Why?
You are crazy. Do you know how much this is? It is a lot, Layla said, her voice gaining strength. But I didn't play to get paid. I played because you told me I couldn't. If I take that money, I am playing for you. And that makes me an employee doing a job. I am already an employee doing a job. She gestured to the cleaning cart in the corner. I am good at my job. I work hard. But the piano, that is the only part of me that is still free. If I sell it even once, it becomes work too. And then I will have nothing left that is just mine. Amir stood there, holding the money, looking completely bewildered. He had never met anyone who didn't want his money. He had never met anyone who valued their soul more than his wallet. He looked at the bills in his hand, then at the young woman in the stained uniform. For the first time in years, he felt poor. He had everything, and yet she had something he couldn't buy. You are a very strange girl, Amir said quietly. He put the money back into his pocket, slowly, almost reverently. I am just doing my job, sir, Layla said. And now, I really must go. She turned toward the door again. Wait, Amir said. He didn't try to stop her with money this time. He didn't try to use his power. If you won't take money, then teach me. Layla paused. She turned back, confused. Teach you? Amir walked over to the piano bench. He sat down heavily, looking ridiculous in his expensive suit on the small bench. He looked at the keys, hesitantly reaching out a finger. I have everything, he said, sounding strangely sad. I have companies, and buildings, and cars. But I cannot make this thing sing. I press the keys, and it just makes noise. You press them, and it sounds like life. He looked up at her, his guard completely down. He looked like a lonely child asking for help. I don't want to buy the music. I want to know how to find it. Can you show me? Leela looked at him. She saw the arrogance was gone, melted away by the reality of his own emptiness. She saw a man who had spent a lifetime collecting things and missed. Out on the feeling of creating something, she looked at the clock on the wall. Her break was definitely over. Her supervisor would be looking for her. She would probably get yelled at. But looking at Amir, sitting there waiting, she knew she couldn't just walk away. I am not a teacher, Layla said softly. She walked back toward the piano, but she didn't sit on the bench. She stood beside him. You are the best teacher I have right now, Amir said. Layla sighed. She pointed to a specific key on the piano. Okay, but you have to listen. You cannot just buy the answer. You have to feel it. Amir nodded. I am listening. And, Layla added, a small smile finally touching her lips. You cannot tell my boss I am late. Amir looked up at her, and for the first time he genuinely smiled. It wasn't a smirk. It was a real smile. I own the resort contract for the next week, he said. Your boss won't say a word. You have my word. Layla took a deep breath. She reached out and placed her hand over his, guiding it to the keys. All right, she said. Let's try one note. Just one. Layla stood beside the bench, her cleaning apron brushing against the expensive fabric of Amir's suit. It felt like a scene from a different world. Just 10 minutes ago, the space between them had been a wall of class and status. Now, it was just two people by a piano. Amir's hand hovered over the keys. His fingers were manicured, soft, and perfectly clean. He looked like a man who spent his life signing checks and shaking hands, not doing hard work. He pressed down on a white key. A dull thud echoed through the lobby. It was a sound without soul, flat and uninteresting. Too hard, Layla said gently. She didn't shout. She wasn't the boss anymore, and he wasn't the arrogant guest. She was the musician, and he was the student. You are attacking it. You think if you hit it harder, it will sound better. Amir frowned, staring at his hand. In my world, if you want a result, you apply pressure. You push until things move. This isn't business, Layla said. She reached out and took his hand. It was strange to touch a guest like this, but she didn't care about the rules anymore. She turned his hand over, palm up. Your hand is stiff. You are holding all the tension in your wrist. The sound gets stuck in your arm. It never reaches the wood. She pressed her thumb against the center of his palm. Relax. Let your wrist go soft like a wet noodle. Amir tried to relax. He let out a long breath, his shoulders dropping 2 inches. He was trying, but his body was so used to being tense, ready for the next deal or the next argument. He looked at Layla, waiting for the next instruction. He looked vulnerable, almost like a child learning to walk. Now, Layla said, pointing to a note in the middle of the keyboard. Try the C note. Don't push. Just let the weight of your arm fall into the key. Imagine you are putting your head on a pillow. Amir hesitated. He was a man who controlled things, not a man who surrendered to them. But he trusted her voice. It was calm and steady. He lifted his finger and brought it down. This time he didn't strike. He let it fall. A clear, round note sang out. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it wasn't a thud either. It was a pure, ringing sound that floated in the air. Amir's eyes widened. He looked at the piano, then at his finger, as if it belonged to someone else. It vibrated, he whispered. Yes, Layla smiled. The piano is alive, Amir, but you have to treat it with respect. You have to listen to it. She walked around the bench and sat down on the very edge, leaving him plenty of space. She didn't play a song. She played a simple 3-note chord. It was warm and inviting. Hear that? That is a C major chord. It sounds like home. It sounds like coming inside after a long day. She looked at him. Your turn. Find the notes. E and G. Make the shape of a triangle with your hand. Amir searched for the keys. He found them slowly. He pressed them down, carefully trying to copy her motion. The sound was a little jagged, the timing slightly off, but the tone was there. It was full. For the next 20 minutes, the lobby of the luxury resort transformed. The busy staff stopped whispering about the drama. The guests stopped looking at their watches. They watched this strange para billionaire in a tailored suit and a maid in a uniform, huddled over the piano, laughing over missed notes. Amir was frustrated at first. He was used to being good at everything immediately. When he messed up a rhythm, his jaw tightened, and he let out a huff of annoyance. No, he muttered, almost hitting the keys in anger. Stop, Lila said firmly. She put her hand on his forearm to stop him. You are doing it again. You are rushing. You want to get to the end of the song? But there is no finish line. The joy is in the middle and the playing. Amir looked at her hand on his arm. He looked at her face. She wasn't judging him. She wasn't impressed by his money or his title. She just saw a man trying to learn. He realized he hadn't felt this scene in years. His employees were scared of him. His partners wanted things from him, but Layla just wanted him to make a nice sound. Okay, Amir breathed out. He forced his shoulders to drop again. Slowly, they played a simple melody together. Layla played the bass notes, the foundation, and Amir played the melody. It was a simple folk song, something slow and sweet. They made mistakes. They hit wrong notes, and they laughed. It was a real, human laugh, not the polite laugh he used at parties at one point. Amir's phone, sitting on top of the piano, began to buzz. It was an important call, perhaps, a business deal worth millions. The screen lit up, vibrating against the wood. He glanced at it. The old Amir would have snatched it up immediately. The old Amir would have stood up and walked away, leaving the lesson behind because business was business. But the new Amir just reached over and pressed a button to silence it. He slid the phone off the piano and onto the floor without looking. He turned back to the keys. Wrong note, he grinned at Layla. You missed the G, she teased back. They played until the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the marble floor. The light hit the piano, making it glow. The music they made wasn't perfect. It was full of hesitations and corrections. But it had something professional music often lacked. It had a connection. Finally, Leela played a final resolving chord and Amir lifted his hands. Letting the sound fade into silence, he sat there for a moment, his hands hovering over the keys. He felt different. His arms felt loose. His mind, usually racing with 1,000 thoughts, was quiet. He felt a peace he hadn't felt in a very long time. He realized that for an hour, he hadn't been a billionaire. He hadn't been a boss. He had just been a student, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he had enough. "I didn't know music could feel like that," Amir said softly. He didn't look at Leela. He kept looking at the keys, as if they held a secret he was just beginning to understand. "It feels like talking without words," Layla said. She stood up, brushing off her apron. The break was long over. She knew she would be in trouble, but looking at Amir's calm face, she knew it was worth it. Amir stood up too. He buttoned his jacket, straightening his clothes. He put his armor back on, but his eyes were still soft. He looked at Leela with a look of profound gratitude. "Thank you," he said. It wasn't a casual thanks. It was heavy with meaning. "You have given me a gift today that money cannot buy. You reminded me that I am human." Layla smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "You just needed to slow down, sir." "We all do." He pulled his wallet out again. This time, he didn't flash the cash. He took out a plain white card and placed it on the piano. "This is my personal number. Not for business. For music," Layla looked at the card. She didn't pick it up. "Sir, I appreciate it, but I work here. I don't give lessons." "I know," Amir said. "But I am a stubborn man, and I am a terrible student. I will need someone to remind me not to attack the piano." He smiled. "Please, just take it. If you ever want to play or if you ever need anything." Layla hesitated. She thought about her mother. She thought about the bills. She thought about how nice it would be to have a friend who wasn't a coworker. She reached out and took the card. "I will think about it," she said. "That is all I ask," Amir replied. He picked up his phone from the floor. He checked it, saw the missed calls, but he didn't look stressed. He just slipped it into his pocket. He looked at the people in the lobby, who were now politely clapping. He waved them off, shaking his head. He didn't want applause for this. This moment was private. "I have to go to a meeting," Amir said, turning back to Leela. "A very boring meeting with very boring people. But I will be thinking about that C major chord." "Good luck, sir," Leela said. He turned and walked toward the glass doors that led to the terrace. He walked with a lighter step than when he came in. The heavy, arrogant man who had insulted her was gone. In his place was a man who had learned a lesson in humility. Layla watched him go. She picked up her cleaning cart from the corner. Her back hurt, her feet were sore, and she was hours behind on her work. But as she pushed the cart toward the staff elevator, she realized she was humming the melody they had just played. She pressed the button for the basement. The doors opened, and she stepped in, leaving the luxury behind. But she carried the music with her. It wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was a part of her strength. She realized that she didn't need his validation to know she was good, but she was glad she could give him a moment of peace. The elevator doors closed. Layla took the card out of her pocket and looked at it one last time before putting it away safely. She didn't know if she would ever call him, but she knew she would never look at the piano in the lobby the same way again. It wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a bridge, and today she had walked across it. The next few days at the resort felt different for Layla. The grand lobby, with its high ceilings and shiny floors, didn't seem as intimidating as it used to. When she walked through with her cleaning cart, she didn't stare at the ground. She held her head up. She noticed the light coming through the windows and the way the chandelier sparkled. She felt like she belonged there, just as much as the guests did. But life moved on. She didn't see Amir again. She assumed he had checked out and gone back to his busy life of jets and business meetings. She kept his white card in her pocket, tucked safely behind her staff ID, but she never took it out. She didn't need to. The memory of that afternoon was enough. It gave her a secret confidence. When she scrubbed the floors or polished the mirrors, she did it with a little more rhythm, a little more pride. However, Layla carried a heavy burden. Her mother was getting sicker. The money she sent home every month was paying for the doctors, but it wasn't enough anymore. The treatments were expensive, and the hospital bills were piling up. Layla was tired all the time. She picked up extra shifts whenever she could, working late into the night until her back ached and her eyes burned. She was doing everything she could, but she felt like she was slowly sinking underwater. One Tuesday evening, the lobby was quieter than usual. A famous pianist had been hired to play during dinner. He was a young man with a tuxedo and perfectly styled hair. He sat at the piano, playing complex pieces that were very fast and very technical. He was showing off. He hit every note perfectly, but the music felt cold. It was impressive, like watching a machine work, but it didn't make anyone feel anything. Layla stood near the back, leaning against her cleaning cart. She was taking a short break to listen. She watched the guests sipping their wine and nodding politely. They looked bored. They were listening, but they weren't hearing. Then she saw a familiar figure walk into the lobby. It was Amir. He looked different than the last time she saw him. He wasn't wearing a suit. He had on simple dark trousers and a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, but his face was relaxed. He walked alone, carrying a small bag. He stopped near the edge of the room, far away from the important guests, near the front. Leela's heart jumped. She smoothed her apron and thought about going over to say hello, but she hesitated. He was a guest. She was working. And besides, what would she say? Thanks for the piano lesson? It felt awkward. Amir stood with his hands in his pockets, listening to the famous pianist. After a minute, he shook his head slightly and turned to walk toward the bar. On his way, he spotted Layla. His face lit up. He changed direction immediately and walked right over to her. "Hello," he said. He had a warm smile on his face. "Hello, sir," Layla said.
Welcome back. It is good to be back, Amir said.
He glanced at the pianist. "He is very fast, isn't he?" "He is very skilled," Layla said politely. "But he is boring," Amir whispered, leaning in slightly like he was sharing a secret. "He is playing with his hands, not his heart. I have been listening for 5 minutes, and I feel nothing." Layla smiled. "You are becoming an expert, sir." "I am practicing," Amir laughed. "I actually bought a piano. It is in my office. I play every morning for 15 minutes before I look at my emails. My secretary thinks I have lost my mind." "That is wonderful," Layla said sincerely. "Speaking of which," Amir said. His expression turned more serious. He looked at Layla closely. He noticed the dark circles under her eyes. He noticed that her uniform looked a little bit looser on her than before. He saw the tiredness in her posture that she tried so hard to hide. "You look exhausted, Layla," he said gently. Layla looked down at her shoes. "It is just a busy week, sir. Lots of weddings and events." "It is more than that," Amir said. "I know things about people. It is my job to know things. You are carrying a heavy weight."
Layla sighed.
She didn't want to complain, especially not to him. But she was so tired. "My mother," she whispered. "She is in the hospital. The medicine is very expensive. I am working as much as I can, but..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Amir nodded slowly. He didn't say anything right away. He didn't offer her money like he did the first time they met. He knew she would just refuse it. He knew she had too much pride for that. He thought for a moment, tapping his finger on the handle of her cart. "I have an idea," Amir said. "But I need you to trust me." Layla looked up at him warily. "An idea?" "I am hosting a private dinner tomorrow night," Amir explained. "Just a few business partners. Very boring people. I need entertainment, not a show. Not a tuxedo player who plays fast music. I need music that makes people relax. Music that feels like home." He looked at her intensely. "I want you to play. I will pay you the same rate I pay the famous pianist over there. For 1 hour of work." Layla shook her head immediately. "Sir, I can't. I told you, I am not a professional. I am a maid. I can't just perform at a billionaire's dinner." "Yes, you can," Amir said firmly. "I heard you play. And more importantly, I felt you play. These guests, they have everything. They have money, big houses, fast cars. They don't need more perfection. They need to feel something real. And you have that?" Paused. "And Layla, think about your mother. The money for 1 hour would cover a lot of medicine. Layla bit her lip. The money was tempting. It was more than she made in a week. It would help so much. But she was scared. What if I mess up? What if I am not good enough? You won't mess up, Amir said, because you won't be playing to impress them. You will be playing for your mother. You will be playing for her health. Focus on that love, and the music will come. Leela looked into his eyes. She saw that he wasn't asking this to be cruel. He was trying to help her in a way that let her keep her dignity. He was offering her a job, a chance to use her gift to solve her problem. Okay, Layla said softly. I will do it, Amir smiled. Good. Wear whatever you want. Don't dress up like a guest. Come as you are. The next evening, Layla stood in the corner of a private dining room. It was a beautiful room with a view of the ocean. There were about 10 people sitting around a long table, eating expensive food and talking quietly. Leela was wearing her own dress, a simple green cotton dress she had brought from home. She didn't wear any makeup. She looked like herself. She felt nervous. Her hands were shaking a little. But then she looked at the door, and she saw Amir. He was talking to a man in a gray suit. But he stopped and gave Leela a small nod. He looked calm. Leela walked over to the piano in the corner. It wasn't the big one from the lobby, but it was a nice instrument. She sat down. She took a deep breath. She thought about her mother in the hospital bed. She thought about the hope of getting her better. She closed her eyes. She started to play. She didn't play a classical piece. She played a song from her childhood, a lullaby her mother used to hum. It was a simple melody, repetitive and soothing. At first, the guests didn't really notice. They kept eating and talking, but slowly the room got quieter. The gentle, flowing melody began to weave through the air. It was soft and warm, like a blanket. The conversations died down. One by one, the guests stopped eating. They just listened. They weren't listening to technique. They were listening to the love in the music. They were hearing the daughter playing for her mother. It touched a place in them that money couldn't reach. The tired-looking woman in the red dress put down her fork and closed her eyes. The grumpy man with the gray suit stopped complaining and just stared at the tablecloth. Looking peaceful, Layla played for the full hour. She didn't rush. She didn't try to show off. She just poured her love into the keys. When she played the final chord and let her hands rest in her lap, the room was silent for a long time. Then Amir stood up. He started to clap. Slowly, the other guests joined in. It wasn't polite applause. It was real, appreciative clapping. Layla stood up. She felt light. She felt like she had done something important. Amir walked over to her, shaking the hands of his guests as he passed them. He reached the piano and handed her a thick envelope. It was more than the money he promised. There was a check inside. You did it, Amir whispered. You healed them. And you healed your fear. Thank you, Layla said, clutching the envelope. For everything. No, Amir said, placing a hand on her shoulder. Thank you. You reminded me why I wanted to learn. You are a true musician, Layla. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. He leaned in closer. And send the bill for the hospital directly to my office. I will take care of the rest. Leela's eyes widened. Sir, you don't have to. I want to, he said firmly. Consider it an investment. I want you to keep playing. The world needs your music. Layla looked at him, tears welling in her eyes. She didn't know what to say. So she just nodded. Amir smiled, patted her shoulder one last time, and turned back to his guests. Now, she heard him say loudly to the room, Who wants to try the piano? It is easier than it looks. Lila walked out of the room, holding the envelope tight against her chest. She walked through the lobby of the resort. She saw the shiny floors and the expensive guests, but she didn't feel small anymore. She knew that no matter what she wore or how much money she had something powerful inside her. She walked toward the staff elevator, but she didn't go down to the basement. She walked outside instead. The night air was cool. She looked up at the stars. She took the card out of her pocket and looked at it one last time. She didn't need it to find work anymore. She kept it because it reminded her that even a billionaire could be a student, and even a maid could be a master. She smiled at the sky, took a deep breath of the sweet night air, and hummed the lullaby as she walked toward the hospital. Her mother was going to be okay, and Leela was going to keep playing,